So one of the things I find interesting about the uprisings that often doesn't get covered, particularly in regular media outlets, is the deep involvement of the United States in the region. We know it's deeply involved. It's not a secret. But we tend to look at the uprisings as if they're standalone units. What happened in Egypt is about Egypt domestic politics. What happened in Bahrain is about Bahraini domestic politics. And we've talked a bit about the role of Saudi Arabia and other Gulf actors who are all trying to, and Turkey, trying to exploit the uprisings to extend their reach in the region. What about the United States?
My impression of the United States is that it had a pretty coherent policy from roughly the 1950s till the 1990s, which was protect Israel, keep the flow of oil going, and keep out the Soviet Union. Those three things were its main concerns, and that required them supporting the Arab autocratic regimes, whether they were monarchies or so-called republics. But so there's that long tradition of American support, which was relatively consistent. People complained about it, but nobody could do anything about it. What's happened now is we've got this new factor of huge popular uprisings. The citizens of the Arab countries are speaking out. They don't like what the United States is doing, whether it's in Israel or in supporting dictators or in other things. So the citizens of the Arab world are rising up, and the United States doesn't quite know how to deal with self-determinant citizens, with citizens who actually speak their mind, who demand their rights. And the language of the uprisings is exactly the language of the American Declaration of Independence. It's almost identical, what they're seeking. The other thing that's happened is you've got all these other powers that are much more directly involved in the Middle East now. Turkey, Russia is way more involved now than it was before. Iran directly involved in several countries, and the UAE and the Saudis are doing things all around the region. So you've got a lot more internal and regional dynamism going on, which in the past it wasn't like that. You have basically had the Russians or the Soviets and the Americans and the Israelis. And so I think the US is totally confused, still basically supports the autocratic regimes because it's afraid that if things open up, you're going to get chaos and terrorism. Now, the US also maintains this policy, I believe, because they feel that terrorism is pretty much under control, that the US is not heavily threatened by terrorism. Other people may be, but the US doesn't care about other people. And the oil flow is moving. That's never going to change. People are going to sell their oil. And then you've got the question of Israel. Israel is very powerful. Israel can protect itself, doesn't need the US. And therefore, I sense that the United States doesn't see the Middle East as a region of strategic importance like it used to be. There still are important elements in the region, but nowhere does the importance of the Middle East to the US today get close to what it was in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And therefore, I think US policy in the Middle East is kind of floating a little bit, and we'll see what happens with the Biden people now they're in power. You're starting to see little hints of some changes here and there with the Turks and the Saudis and others. But I sense that the United States is a power that is less interested in the Middle East than it used to be.